I just spoke with one of the teachers out there, Mr. Minihan. He was 12 when I started at the So what, I'll be brief because I think Carol's going to talk a little bit more about the program in terms of where we are now. But we have a group mentoring program that I started back when I was here after school. And it was for those kids that really needed more of a bigger connection in their life. And I brought some people in from the community, a few teachers, and we'd meet after school, and we'd do activities, there'd be a conversation, and there's always food, because it was middle school boys. We started off with just a boys program. Greg Vicarello has taken over the boys program, and is continuing to rebuild that program right now. But I can tell you just briefly what I've learned, because we went and established a similar program at Clinton. And right now I'm running the boys program, and Mary Sarah Loosemore, who has a Tohoto connection as well, is running the girls program. And what we hope to do is to bring a girls program here to Tohoto. That's our intention. I'll just say briefly two things. What I've learned over the last 5 years since we started in Clinton, that it's really about connection. It's about connecting these kids with mentors, male mentors that come in from the male group, female mentors that come in for our girls group. And it's about connecting them with the community, because we've done more things in the community. We've brought in people from the community. We have police officers, and we've worked out ways to get 2 police officers into each of our meetings, two with the girls group. Well, right now there's 1. Eventually we'd like to have 2. And teachers, because we find that those people are really key people in working with our youth. And we target middle school kids, boys and girls right now to start off with. But those are really key people, because it gives the boys and the girls a chance to connect with somebody. When they connect with a teacher on site here, who's in our program, it opens up a different world, because we become pretty open with our conversation. We talk about anything, and it opens up the door for the kids to talk about things as well. So that key connection is that community. We like to expand more here within the community than we have up to this point. And we probably ask some of the school committee people in terms of who you know that would then support us, and we can develop relationships. We have people from the community come in and talk to our students as part of our after-school program. We have our after-school program go to their place and learn what they're up to. We'd like to establish those kinds of connections here. The second thing is REAL. It's called a Real Mentors Program, and REAL stands for Respect, Engage, Acknowledge, and Listen. And those are the tenets with which we operate. That's what we try to teach the kids within our meetings. That's what we try to uphold within our meetings and outside of our meetings, is to help kids learn those skills so they can connect and build relationships with other people. And it's proven really successful. The kids keep coming back. The kids keep going beyond middle school at times. It's not for everybody, but we have a good group of kids that have continued to come with us. We'd like to expand and bring the girls program here. I want to say just a few words.
Sure. My name is Mary Sarah Loosemore, and I was a teacher here at Tohoto from 1997 until 2007. And then I came back for a brief all-star reunion year in 2016. This was my first school, and I had taught at several since, but I always think of Tohoto as my only school. And I've told others that have not been here, which I don't have a problem with. I feel like it's my home still. We did, as Jay said, we started a girls mentoring program on November 13th with a small group of middle school girls in Clinton, and have had tremendous success. It's just been wonderful and amazing and encouraging. And so I am hoping that we can do the same here at Tohoto for the middle school girls here. That is my hope, and it would fall under the same umbrella of Real Mentors, and it would follow the same basic model as the boys program that is already established here at Tohoto. So thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next for public comment, we have Jessica Daly-Berry.
Sorry, Springs is here and drove like I used to as a teenager. So dear Wilson Berlin School Committee and concerned residents watching online, I promise tonight in regards to the letter being written to Desi. I first want to thank Dr. Susan Henry for her service. She was always respectful, mindful of her position to represent her town, and careful to analyze data to help her make those decisions. It's very sad that we lost such an intelligent individual due to bullying within the community. So, like I said, my comments in regards to the letter being sent and written to Desi. I'm concerned that the individual writing the letter will not represent the district with respect and a civil tone. Of note, anyone, including a newspaper reporter, can request her resignation letter as is part of the public record, along with many other communications to the committee. So dating back to March 9th, 2021 meeting, there's been swearing, disrespect to the teachers on their remote learning efforts and to Mr. Zangi himself, and also blatant disregard for current data in favor of personal opinion. Holding a seat on the school committee means representing the towns, not your individual views, reviewing the data and discussing per the open meeting law, and then with respect, coming to a collective agreement and then voting. The school committee meetings have often occurred on Zoom the past 2 years due to COVID, and it might have given the illusion that you as a committee were operating in a vacuum. I would like to point out that although only 15 or so people attended the meeting last week, over 200 people were on Zoom watching the meeting. Some parents were prevented by COVID infections from attending in person. I am hopeful that a survey will be sent out soon from the superintendent that will allow parents to voice their opinions on masks, so that when the committee can review the data and not solely based on a few parents' opinions, my own included. Thankfully, states surrounding us are reviewing the data and the downward trends of COVID and ending mask mandates on an appropriate schedule. Connecticut, February 28th, New Jersey, March 7th, Delaware and Oregon, March 31st. I trust Desi also to follow the CDC guidance of masking up indoors in over 50 COVID cases per 100,000 residents, or a positivity rate of at least 8%. As of February 3rd, last Thursday, only 5 days ago, 99.9% of the country did not meet for this requirement to be removed. But thankfully, the last week has shown the continued decline in the cases, something that was not guaranteed with the subvariant of Omicron threatening to stall the decline in cases. I hope that Desi will reinstate the mask mandate if we reach those benchmarks again. I encourage parents and the school committee to continue discussions with respect and with an effort to remain civil. As Lori said last meeting, in the end, we're all neighbors, and if I might add, our children friends. Finally, I end with a district-wide request that many people run this November for elections and even more show up to vote. Neglecting this voting duty has led to certain books being banned in other states, and it is our duty to come. Respectfully, and departing because I have patients still at the clinic, Jessica Daly-Berry.
Thank you, Jessica. Okay, we are going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Adam, can I get a second?
Second.
Julie. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well, opposed? Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented passes. We are going to move on to the reorganization of the Berlin-Boylston Regional School Committee. At this time, I would like to entertain a motion to elect a new chair.
I'll make a motion to elect Lori Hart as our new chair.
Second.
All in favor? I'm sorry, discussion?
As acting chair, Madam Chair.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I'm an aye as well. The motion to elect Lori Hart as chair passes.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I would like
Thank
to
you. All of our people. Thank you.
I would like to make a motion to elect Megan Brill as vice chair.
So moved.
Second, excellent. So moved. So that's Adam, and then a second.
Second.
Mike? Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well, opposed? Motion to elect Megan Brill as vice chair passes. Congratulations. I would like to entertain a motion to appoint a member to replace Susan on the policy subcommittee.
Point of order, you have a secretary election for this.
I spoke to Christy about that. Are you still retaining?
Yeah, I just wanted to, sorry on
Thank you, yes, we discussed that, and because you already have the position, as long as you're good with it.
that. Absolutely.
Excellent, thank you for pointing that out, I appreciate it. So would someone like to appoint someone to the policy subcommittee?
I move to appoint Lori Hart to the policy subcommittee.
Can I have a second?
Second.
So Adam and Mike, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well, opposed? The motion passes. The motion to elect Lori Hart to the policy subcommittee passes. I would like to entertain a motion to appoint a member to replace Susan on the negotiation committee.
I'll make a motion to have Lori Hart be part of the negotiation subcommittee.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Nate, opposed? Okay, motion to appoint Lori Hart to the negotiation committee passes. And now we're on to reports. And we begin with Mr. Zangi.
Okay, I'm going to go a little bit out of order here. I'm going to do letter B for a district improvement plan, just to tell you about the timeline. We talked a little bit about that earlier, so we'll start collecting data in March, and we will actually put together a new transition district improvement plan that will run from 2023 to 2025. We'll put that together in the summer for a vote by this committee in most likely September. There was some discussion of whether it was going to be a vote in December by whoever the next committee is going to be. But after we discussed it with the leadership team, we just thought it'd be better just to have this committee vote on it. We've done most of the work with us and until September. So that's that. We'll talk a little bit more about that as it goes on. Athletic fees, typically once a year, the committee votes on whether to change athletic fees. Usually the vote is that we're going to increase them. After some discussions, we decided that this would not be a good year to increase athletic fees. So we decided not to bring it up for a vote. And so they would remain the same, the athletic fees would remain the same for the 22-23 school year. And finally, the enrollment report, I think you have that. So let me just try to go over this as quickly as I can. We usually do this once a year. I didn't do it last year because the NASDAQ didn't really provide any accurate data. But the NASDAQ is the group that provides most of the data we use. And what they use for their forecasting is the criteria. You see their birth rate, migration, home sales, age group trends, new construction, past enrollment history, health trends, economic trends, and school choice. And they don't always apply to us, but birth rate certainly does. Migration, typically the town does not have a lot of rentals, but with more rentals being built, that will have an impact. Certainly home sales, age group trends, families with children between 1 and 4 years old tend to be a little more mobile. Once this child gets older than that, they tend to try to find a home and settle down. Baby boomers, we do have some in the community. They tend to downsize, so they move. New construction, we have quite a bit of that going on. past enrollment history, the projections use a 5-year rolling average. Certainly health trends are gonna have an impact with COVID, and also the opioid epidemic has had a major impact on young kids. Economic trends now with inflation. We have families who have moved out of the suburbs because of prices of gas and rent, move closer to the city. Not as big of an issue with us, but certainly school choice is. NESDEC uses a technique called cohort survival technique, and it takes the number of students that will historically survive from one grade to the next. And they use those percentages to come up with a ratio, which they then apply to the next grades up. It has about a 99% accuracy per year for the first 5 years. And so for a 5-year forecast, it's accurate between 95 and 99%. After that, it just goes off the cliff. So once you start looking out past 10 years and past, you can have up to a 30 to a 40% error. So that's why we don't, even though they look out that far, we typically don't go out that far. This technique is reliable, but it's less reliable under 2 conditions. One, when a district has 1,000 or less students, and the other is when there's a lot of building going on. We have both of those in our community, which makes forecasting enrollment much more difficult. So I'll start going through the towns. I won't go through all the numbers. You have those. I will say, if you look at Berlin Memorial, the enrollment numbers have stayed fairly stable, and part of that is because they have whatever master plan in Berlin that they work on. So up until now, at least, they've been able to not caps, because they don't have official caps on building permits, but the building in Berlin has been much lower than it has been in Boylston. Also, if you look at the birth rate in Berlin, it's been stable. It's gone up about one birth per year, so the rolling average for birth in Berlin is about 24. It has gone up by 1 to 25. So it's not tremendous, but it's certainly increasing, and it will increase more with increased building. The next piece of data I have there is the number of children born versus the K enrollment. And you see, if you look at the graph, it's a little easier to see. These are usually just worksheets I use for myself, and it's just easy to explain them. If you look at the number of children born, which is the blue line, and then the K enrollment, which is the gray line, and then what I did is I just put trend lines in there, so you can see that they're almost parallel. So the number of children born and the number of children that then attend K 5 years later is very similar. So that's been pretty constant in that town. The thing that may change some of that is the next set of data I show, which is building permits. It's been pretty low, but in 2021, so in 2015, 7 permits, 2019, 11 permits, in 2021, 48 permits. Now, 34 of those have been 55 and older, but you have to remember that about, I think it's 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 grandparents take care of their children now. So even though it's a 55 and older community, there is still a possibility that we get children out of that development like that. 14 of those permits are single families, and 12 of those, there's a 12-unit development going in right next to Berlin Memorial. So one of those permits, one of the 48, is for one of the houses that's going in there. But they're all big houses. So, you don't know. You don't know. You could get no children out of there, which is unlikely. You could get 25. And so the other 11 permits just for that single-family development would most likely come in 2022. And that will affect, by the time someone pulls a permit and someone occupies the house, is roughly 1 to 3 years. And if they have children when they, when they get there, it's basically 5 years. So we'll see how that goes. Fortunately, one of the things we have in favor in Berlin is the size of the school. Currently, the average size of the classroom is around 14 students per class, and that's fairly low. So we could have up to 18 in a class. It would still be comfortable. It's not always what you want, but there's some room to grow there. What there isn't room for there is more than 2 classrooms per grade. You just don't have the space. So when it gets to that point, which I don't see in the very near future, there's going to be, it'll have to be a different kind of conversation.
This is Berlin you're talking about.
Berlin, yeah. Did I say Boston?
No, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, this is Berlin. What else about that? River Bridge, which is the 204 apartment complex, that's completed. And so far we have, I believe, 4 students out of that, which originally they forecasted 29, then they forecasted 0. And so 4 is what we got so far. And I think it's fully occupied as far as I know. Any questions about Berlin? Good. Move on to Boylston. Boylston's a little bit different, because Boylston has had lots of building, even before I arrived here. I remember, it's an interesting thing when my first interview was at PES, and it was in the library, the media center, and I got there early to drive around the town, and I remember someone saying that the population was going down, and I had just driven up SeaWorld, and I wanted the job, so I didn't say, well, you've driven up, around the corner, and that would seal it for me. But there's a lot of building going on there, and there continues to be a lot of building in that area. So if you look at the projections, the projections, and these are October 1 numbers for enrollment at BES. If you look at the projection versus the actual, so they're both October 1 reports, you can see that the actual numbers are always greater than the projections are. So that school is increasing at a much higher rate than Berlin Memorial. If you look at the number of children born, you can see that that's increasing too. And in fact, I stopped at 2017, but if you go out to this year, the rolling 10-year average has been 35. This is the first year that the average is above 40. So you have a birth rate that's increasing, and you have increased building permits. If you look at the number of children born versus K enrollment, you see a different picture than you see in Berlin. And if you look at the graph, just look at the trend line. If you see the trend line for K enrollment, look at the slope of that versus the trend line for the number of children born, which is increasing, but the enrollment is far outpacing the number of children born. So when you look at a trend like that, you think to yourself, well, something's happening there, because a lot more students are enrolling in K than are being born in the town. So it's either that we born, who were residents there who were born. That means these are students who were either moving in after, or it was something with new construction. They're either renting or they're into the new construction. And if you look at the building permits, in 2015, there were 23. In 2019, there were 42. In 2020, 21, there were only 10. But when you look at what's projected for 2022, that's a different story, because there are there are 63 rental units that are going to be put in, proposed on the corner of Cyril and 140, right across from Press Technologies. And there'll be 16 affordable units and 47 market rate units. There are 8 two-families going in a development, and there are 5 to 6 single families going in. So those are all going to equate to more children. I mean, there's no question that that's going to happen. I think there are 3 commercial projects that are also going in Boylston, so maybe that offsets it. But when we see this kind of growth, you know, Bob is ready to go off the roof when he sees stuff like that. Like you translate, but you think about it, we pay roughly to educate a child, you know, probably between $18,000 to $20,000 a year. So each of those children, you know, they represent an increase in our budget, and that's the real point. This is why we do this. It's one to forecast how much space we're going to need, and to figure that out. But it's also for the budget, because, and I said this at a budget meeting so far, and when we met with the towns, and we have another town meeting coming up. As long as the building increases at the pace it is, especially in Boylston, increases of 2.5% and 3% become less likely to be met, especially when you have increased special ed costs, because you just have too many kids. And like I said, each of those kids, when you factor in instructional materials, when you factor in salaries for teachers, it's roughly $20,000 per student. That's a regular student. If it's a student who requires, is it outplacement? Something like that. It could be between 75 and 300,000, and we have all of that range here, and they could just move in. And so, budgets of 2.5%. They really aren't realistic as long as you continue to build, unless you have something that offsets that. And then I just added the Tohoto numbers in there. Again, just so you can take a look at them. But are there any questions on the enrollment?
I have a couple here. So one of them is, I know that Lori, you're an appointed member to the Master Planning Committee in Boylston. To what extent do you know that they're having conversations about capacity planning when they consider the master plan? Is that something that's coming up in that group, or?
I don't know. I was actually just thinking that I should send this to the group, because I think it would be extremely helpful for them to have these projections.
Yeah. So the other question I have, Jeff, is as we think about BES, as this sort of continues, is there a point at which we start running out of available classroom space? If we need to add 30 more classrooms in individual grades, and when do we get to that point? They want to maintain reasonable classroom size.
Yeah, they still have room. I mean, they still have some classrooms that aren't being used, but they're getting up there. Their average classroom size is, I think it's around 18 now. So, once you hit that 20 mark, and I know, I've had classes at 26. People have them, but it's not optimal. And again, I always point this out. When I took this job here, and they did a survey for the town, and the question they asked, a number of questions, but one of the questions was, what do you want the superintendent and the new superintendent to be able to achieve? And the very first response was low class sizes. So it's, matter of fact, it came up at least 2 more times in the survey results. So it is something that both towns value, is small class sizes. So, and the towns have been really great at supporting us. I have to say that both towns, to make sure we maintain those. But, we always talk about surveys, we always want to send surveys out. But it was really clear when I interviewed, it was clear that was one of the, that was one of the things that the town prides itself on, that, we have small class sizes and teachers are able to give more individual attention to students. And certainly COVID is, blowing a lot of stuff out of the water, but, before that, that's exactly what was happening. So we've got enough support from the town so far. And so, this is a difficult budget, and you'll see next week, and Bob talked about it, that, special education costs have really skyrocketed. And not just in this community. I talked to another superintendent just before I came who said the same thing. It's their special education numbers that are really driving their budget more than any kind of planned growth.
I think one of the things that these projections miss is a family like my own that moved into town to an existing home when our children were 3 and 4 years old, right? They weren't born when living in Boylston, but they moved to Boylston for whatever reason because of the school system. And so the little things don't get captured as we're replacing an older family in a home that now has young people.
Well, that's, when SA does their projections, they do look at, the downsizing of baby boomers and just the migration in and out. The older families do tend to sell, and they replace like families like yourself who have kids. So, yeah, and again, because we have, it's like our schools, they're so small. We look at MCAS, for example. Even 1 or 2 students can skew the results. And so when you only have 1,000, if you only have 1,000 students and you have a lot of building going on, you have a lot of factors that you really can't, okay if you have one variable, we have 2 that make an enormous difference in the capacity of our schools. So, we keep an eye on it, and, certainly school choice is one of the issues that comes up. And people, usually the rule of thumb, that communities start to get a little antsy about school choice numbers when it starts to edge up to about 25% of your population, because it translates to your graduating class. You have a graduating class, a quarter of them aren't from your towns anymore, so it starts to become an issue. We're not there yet. So.
Jeff, how long can these trends continue before you start thinking about needing new space, new buildings?
I had the principals do projections a couple of years ago, and I have we have it's out past 5 years certainly. Like I said, in Berlin we have very low class sizes, so there's not space, but there's room to grow in the classroom. Boylston is just the opposite. They have bigger classes, but they have some more room to grow in the school. So again, by next year, one of the things Ace asked for is another teacher. He doesn't need one this year. Next year, he'll definitely need one because he will have a big kindergarten class. These classes come in are all 50 plus now. And that's October 1 numbers. By mid-year, they're closer to 60. When you look at all of these numbers, these October 1 numbers, and they don't include the school choice kids, and they don't include the kids who come in.
Well, not only do we eventually need a teacher, but I think that the paraprofessional demand in some of those younger classes, we have bigger class sizes, also increases, right? I mean, that's the other.
Right. I think it's important, you mentioned the master plan. I think it's important. I'm sure they'll consider this enrollment stuff, but the number of buildings you have has such an enormous impact on our schools. It's certainly the amount of taxes that the town gets. If you have 3 kids in the school, that's basically $60,000, like roughly, to educate those kids. Well, the town doesn't get that back in taxes, so it's not like a 1-to-1.
Yeah, not even close.
No, not even close. So at some point, you're spending a lot.
Can I ask you one question, Karen? For both BMS and DES from 2020 to 2021, the jump it's a market jump. In both, do you have any idea why that's so long?
Which one are you looking at?
For Berlin Memorial School, from the projections to the actual, like COVID year, 2020, 2021, went from 150 to 177 with BMS, and then DES was 55. 224, 228, yeah. The others are sort of within projection to
Yeah.
annual, but those are huge jumps.
Yeah, well, again, it's a COVID year.
Right, I was thinking that
Yeah,
one,
so-
yeah,
Yeah, I remember last year I did a sort of a report on the effects of COVID.
Yeah.
It's usually like a 1 year, any natural disaster, they don't have anything on COVID really that's happening, but they have done a lot of research on the effect of natural disasters on birth rate. And it tends to suppress it initially, and then it increases more. So I don't know what happened with the enrollment. We did have a lot of kids with school choice out, and so we had a lot of students that were homeschooled. So during right at the height of the pandemic, so that may have had an impact on it. But given what the year was, it looks like it happened in both schools. So my guess would be that it would be a COVID-related kind of event. Anything else?
You said 5 years, beyond 5 years before you're gonna think about the building. From the time you start thinking about it until it gets built, how long does that typically take?
I don't know what it was for this building.
In Massachusetts, like, I mean, if you're thinking beyond 5 years, is that 6 years, 10 years?
I would say that, again, our projections, when you look at the 10-year, when you look at out to like 2030 or 2031, we're expected to have about a 350 student increase in the district. But it's tough to tell. I mean, you'll only know really when the building gets under control and COVID is over. So I don't even, it'd be tough to even guess that. I mean, we could, if we had 200 extra kids, that would be, that's a lot in a small district. It's only 1,000 kids total, so.
Well, that's my thought. I mean, I'm familiar with the building. It's not, you don't snap your fingers. It's not
No.
gonna be a new school next year.
No.
200 kids coming in. You need probably 5 years to plan it.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the numbers are projected to go up. I've seen the graphs on it, but well, I think probably next year's enrollment projection will be a little more accurate as we start to get past this. And once, I know they are working on the master plan, once they consider that, we have to see, for example, in Boylston, how many students come out of the rentals.
Yeah.
And they tend to have a transient population on top of it, so. We'll see, it's tough to go beyond 5 years with these, communities like these. So we'll keep an eye on it though. And I will look that up, if you could just send me a reminder tomorrow, I will look up the MSBA timeline from the time you actually applied to the time it happens. I can get that information.
Does the town have to vote to build a new school? Or is
Yeah.
that's what I thought, because I know Shrewsbury they just built a new school. And I could have sworn it started years prior to the vote, to Mike's point. It could, because the taxes go up, right?
Yeah, some schools, Auburn High School, 20 years before they had a positive vote.
Right, exactly. So you might say, we need it, and the town's gonna say, well, we're not gonna give it to you. And then you gotta kind of make do, whatever, portables, all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
I have one more question. So, Tohoto, looking at the projected and the actual, so how, those numbers, obviously, it's data. But, okay, I'm trying to think of how to raise this question. So, 2017 to 18 is the exact same number, right? And projected and actual, and then 2020 and 21, and then 21, 22, we're dealing with all the exact same numbers, projected and actual. 6 to 12, yet, if we were to look at 8 to 9, we know kids are leaving the district. So I'm just confused how those numbers can be the same when we're having.
I see when the kids leave at the end of the year, how is the number? Well, if you look at the right on the 2019, 2020, and then you look at the next year, there's a decrease.
Right, but that's projected, so that was started from years prior.
Yeah.
That's based
All right,
on
I see
historical, right?
Well, these numbers don't count into, moving in and out because of school choice or any of that. And, yeah, so these are just, again, these are just the October 1 numbers. So this year, for example, it says 467.
Yeah,
Right now, there's 548 kids in this group, which doesn't, but in order to do an apples to apples comparison, I have to use October 1 numbers, because that's what NESDEC uses.
no, I understand that, but it would reflect the kids that didn't transition from 8 to 9.
Yeah,
Right, and that's a,
so if that stayed consistent over the years, you would see, this number was also stay consistent. If you have any kind of specific questions when you go home and you say, okay, I kind of thought about that and there's something great.
yeah,
Just send it to me. I've got a lot more data on this.
Sure.
This is just a high level stuff, but if there's very specific, like how many from this year to this year, and how many out because of, they went to the vocational school, I can get all of that.
how far is that? would be
Yeah,
great.
so if you have something very specific, I can find it.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Bob?
Good evening. A few items to report on. The first is just a donation from Project Red. It's an organization that its mission is to connect people and communities in Massachusetts for reliable sources of food, while advocating for policies that make food more acceptable. No one goes hungry. This organization has done a lot since the beginning of the pandemic and grown in prominence in advocating for things such as universal free meals across the state, which is now in effect and we hope continues. As part of their mission, they also provide some grants to school districts, and we received a small grant for staff appreciation. They recognize how hard our staff is working, and all staff across the state is working. With free meals, we're selling more than we typically would, so so this money would go towards, I think it was going to be a police vest or some type of shirt for each of the staff members. So that grant is something to vote on in the business items. Just wanted to give you some background on it. The next item is informational. We participate as a district with about 20-something other districts in a collaborative bid for oil by grouping together. This is permitted, one of the methods that's permitted for procurement in the state. By coming together as a group, we get better pricing by being a part of this than we would otherwise because we're a small district. We also use a bid process because the dollar amount we purchase over the year is fairly significant. We also want to be able to predict what we're going to pay for oil next year. There's been huge fluctuations in oil prices and energy in general. So by going out to bid now in the winter, we're able to then budget accurately for next year. And the bid was recently held. The lowest bid, the lowest bidder only bid on was disqualified because they didn't meet the terms of the bid. The next lowest bidder was at $2.90 per gallon. It's a significant increase over what last year's price was, which is just under $1.70. And however, this is reflective of what's going on in the market. It's not really a surprise. In fact, in the preliminary budget that I did, I had estimated about the same increase that we have within $1,000. So we will have an increase of $18,000. This is already baked into our budget. But I just wanted to give you that background on the collective oil bid. The last item I have to report on is excess and deficiency filing, which is finally coming close to completion. I spoke with a representative at the Division of Local Services today and yesterday, working through some of the questions they had, and I expect it will be certified very soon. I'm hoping for next week's meeting. I am getting a little tired of carrying it over as a carryover item on each of my reports, but I hope to have an update for next meeting. We do need their certification in order to use E&V funds in our budget. I'm budgeting to use E&V next year provisionally, assuming it gets accepted. It gets accepted every year. But it is useful to have that certification as soon as we can. That's the last time I have. There's no questions.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. I wanted to start this evening first by thanking the Superintendent's Advisory Council. We met last Thursday evening to go over the equity survey that we had put together. It was a great help. The council worked on the language for that survey, and it will be coming out. We're looking at right after the vacation week because we're trying to switch over into a more efficient system for doing the survey. So we're working on that right now. We also have a mask survey and items, and also the other items related to COVID in the district. We have the language for that in place. We have a subcommittee we've invited from that group tomorrow evening to meet with me and go through the language on that. It's a much shorter survey than the equity survey. Our intention is to get that out through a Google survey on Friday. So look for that in the superintendent's newsletter this week. Also wanted to mention that the Massachusetts Elementary and Secondary Education released its 2021 school and district report cards. That will be coming to parents no later than the 18th of February. It's already on the individual school websites, and we'll be putting that all three on the district website. I think it's really important. It's a comprehensive report. It has an information on student enrollment, teacher workforce, attendance, discipline, performance on state tests, accountability, and school spending all rolled up into one report card. And then speaking of equity, what I also like about this report is you can get it in many different languages. That's the great thing. We used to have to send them out just paper copy, but now there's translations available on that site as well. So please take a look at that, and you'll also be getting them through your schools, through your principals as well. Finally, I want to just briefly speak about the Real Mentors program and thank Mary, Sarah, and Jake for coming out this evening. Jake and I go back to the days of when Jake and Michael Sanford brought in fathering fathers into the elementary schools, and I had an opportunity to work with both gentlemen. In that program, we had an opportunity to bring fathers and their sons together and to bond on weekends, and they would go out and do all kinds of wonderful activities. I remember geocaching, right, and some fishing and all kinds of great activities. From there, Jake took this and started to expand into the program with the boys at the middle school with Greg Picarello, and the opportunity now to bring a girls program into Tohoto as well is a huge step for us. So we're so grateful that both these individuals are willing to do this work, and they've been really trying very hard to get this off the ground. We're looking at funding sources for the positions. I think, Jake, you mentioned all of the positions. I'll just mention them again. We're looking at 4 school staff members to serve as mentors, 2 with the boys group, 2 with the girls group, to have a site coordinator for each program, and then program organizers are hoping to add 2 additional job descriptions filled by men and women from the community and the police departments. I did want to let both of you know that we will be meeting with the Berlin-Williston Crisis team this week on Friday, and we will be asking them for some volunteers from the police department. We do have we have a new female officer in Berlin, and so we're going to be reaching out to them, and they've been great partners to us in the community, so we're excited to have that possibility to come along. I do just want to end with the quote I put in the report because I think it does speak volumes about this program, Jake, and rather than break down the program like in a more concrete way, I'm just going to read the quote because I love Brene Brown. She speaks to my heart, and I'll just share this with everybody because you included this. Connection is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship.
And that's what this program is all about. So very excited to get this off and running. So thank you to both of you. Any questions?
I'm not familiar, I've heard it talked about a couple times with the superintendent's advisory committee. Can you give me a little background on what that group is, what they're advising on, and how it kind of came to be?
It came to be, it's been in place for a couple of years now, it came to be just one of my goals as, just as an effort to get some kind of more community input. And so we actually kind of thought about what they would have, what their function would be. But what they really do now is they advise myself, and Carol was obviously on the committee too, on just initiatives that we have. There are 3 positions on there this year, and we've had people move in and out who actually was at our first meeting, and so we have basically a COVID survey and masking survey. They helped us with those questions, went through it with us. But basically, they do just what the committee, what the name of it is. They advise the superintendent on, just initiatives that I may be thinking about, or something Cal's thinking about too. Bring it before them and, ask them, just get their opinion on them. They've gone through, we have another equity survey going out. They've gone through that entire survey, and they just look at things with a different lens. They split questions up, and they're just looking at it as parents or as, professionals. So that's basically what it is. Started out as one of my goals, and we just continued with it.
So 3 people use it?
How many?
3 people use it?
No, I think there's 7 on it now. 7?
And a student representative.
And a student representative. And I have one of my former students on there too.
Hey, Carol, so I was looking at the report, right? And I was going to go on to, when I looked at the graphs, it says our school, our district, Massachusetts. The one that stood out to me was the access to the arts at Tohoto. That's the only number I can find was below the state. Is there a reason we are that behind the state, or?
That's a good question. I can't answer that right now. I will take a look at it for you. That's access to the arts.
Access to the arts, yeah, because I know when I was appointed to this committee last year, one of the former members was a big advocate for the arts. I was kind of on the same board with him. But I noticed that's about the only number where it shows that we're behind the state that I could find it.
I'll definitely look into that for you. I don't know why that number is lower than the state at this time. I don't know, Jeff, do you?
Well, I don't know the specific answer to that, but I will say it's something we recognize. It's why it's in our district improvement plan.
Yeah.
And actually, that school committee member was one of the first people I went to. I actually went to a shop and talked to them about the goal. It's something we recognize.
Yeah.
A while ago.
I remember having conversations about that, yeah.
Yeah, definitely needs work.
I'm not sure what the criteria for that ranking is.
Okay.
That's why I can let you know about
Yeah.
that.
It just stood out to me as something that pretty important.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Before we move on, I just wanted to thank you for bringing the mentoring program. And Julie and I both have children in the middle school, and there's a real need for this. So I just wanted to thank you. It really warmed my heart to think of guidance. These children just need other voices and a place to be able to speak. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Absolutely.
Janelle, would you like to go ahead?
Sure, so I have a few items to report on as well. I'm going to go a little bit out of order of my report. But I'm going to start, last week we received updated protocols for responding to COVID-19 symptoms and scenarios. It was updated last week by DESE and the DPH. We put the full highlighted document into the drive for you to review. There's a lot of information, a lot of details there, but I did want to point out a few, highlights. And in pointing out these highlights, I did work with our nursing staff to bring these to you. The first is that the COVID-19 symptom list has been updated in the previous edition, which was put out at the end of January. the symptoms were differentiated for vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals. We actually, when we put together our symptomatic testing protocol, we were able to anticipate that was probably going away based on the trend of how things were moving, excuse me. So that list has been slightly updated, taking away that differentiation. We still have 3 protocols for responding to COVID-19 scenarios, and they still, follow the same order. Protocol A is about individuals who have actually tested positive. The only nuance, or the biggest nuance, I should say, in that protocol is that when individuals do return to the school setting, they need to remain masked for 5 days. That's the same. The difference is they can remove their mask when outside. Apparently that was left off in January. So that was December, and that was updated again in January. Protocol B has quite a few changes to it, and this really responds to, there's different versions and multiple parts of Protocol B. We're following the new Protocol B because we have the new at-home testing program. And so individuals, students, and staff are no longer identified as close contacts in school, but there are protocols to be followed if they are a close contact outside of school. And then the third protocol, C, for symptomatic individuals, aligns with the DPH guidance. The update here that was highlighted for me by the nurses is that it is recommended that individuals test as opposed to just sort of monitoring symptoms, but it's a recommendation, not a requirement. I'm going to skip over and go to the update on the at-home COVID testing program. So we've just got that rolled out. The at-home COVID testing program, because we had the weather cancellation on Friday, test kits just went out to students and families on Monday. We had a short amount of time for families to actually opt into the program. That was the way that the state had set up the program. So I'm going to estimate we sent home about 150 kits district-wide on Monday. And then when we redistribute to students again on February 18th, that number is going to be much larger. The numbers that I pulled here on the report, I pulled on Friday afternoon. I checked on them today. They've grown yet again. So people are still opting in. And that's good. So I think that program is, up and running, and we're hearing from families if they have any questions. And then the vaccination data. I worked with the nursing staff on Thursday. This data came from our meeting on Thursday. So as you know, the nurses implemented a new health software program this school year that has a much better reporting, significantly improved reporting. And although we still can't go in and just push a button and say, tell us how many people meet the full vaccination criteria, we can go in, pull multiple small reports, and then crunch the numbers ourselves. And so although we've had that program in place for a little while, it didn't even start to sync with the state data until very recently. So we were just able to pull this data for the first time last week. And it's only reporting the student data, which I have the numbers there for you. So both Berlin and Boylston elementary schools are just above 50%, and Tohoto is very close to 80% for student vaccination rates. I think we figured that is 11 or maybe 12 students away from meeting the 80% mark for vaccination. And then the staff vaccination rates is based on voluntary reporting from staff. There isn't a program that we can pull that data from. So the nurses all along have been sort of keeping lists from staff that are open and willing to share that data. And that's what we see there, which are very high rates of vaccination, anywhere from 87 to 97%. Any questions?
I have a question on the COVID-19 symptom list, which I have continued to find very difficult to interpret. So I look at this and see there are 5 symptoms at the top: fever, difficulty breathing, new loss of taste or smell, muscle ache or body aches, cough. On their own, any of those 5 symptoms would warrant being tested, is that correct?
On our symptomatic testing protocol, yes.
Yes, look at page 3 of that document. Okay. So below that, we have sore throat, nausea, headache, fatigue, nasal congestion. Those all say when in combination with other symptoms. Now, am I to understand that 2 of those symptoms, like sore throat and nausea, or headache and nasal congestion, would prompt a student to be symptomatically tested within the school and to be recommended to be tested based on protocol A?
So there's nurse discretion here for sure. I'm agreeing with you that that my interpretation would be that if there's headache and fatigue, that those 2 symptoms would prompt a nurse to say that the student might be symptomatic and would be looking to see whether or not the student had consent for symptomatic testing at school to test them.
Okay.
I would agree with your interpretation.
Yeah, I don't think this should be aligned with the top 5, which are on their own, yes.
Mhm.
But then the bottom 6, it's any of those 2, potentially, of the 6, unrelated to the top 5.
Mhm.
They used to be.
There used to be, I was just gonna
Bold-
say,
It was bold, and that's one of the changes they made.
there used to be that you had to have, if you had one of the bottom symptoms, it had to be 2. It used to be very,
That's what it says now.
I know, it's different though, that's why I
The
can't speak to
bolded,
that.
my understanding of the previous where it was bolded actually referred to vaccinated and unvaccinated status, that was what the bolden was on that version or iteration. And I know, right, going through it, looking at what's bolded and what's italicized. So if memory serves me correctly, that the bolding referred to an individual's individual's vaccination rate. But this, right, this just puts that aside and has no regard for that. It's just based on the symptoms alone, regardless of the vaccination status.
Thank you.
I have one quick question for you, Janelle. Will families be able to opt into this for as long as they're able to, or is there going to be a closeout in the school time?
The at-home testing program, yeah, families are welcome to opt in and staff are welcome to opt in. It's on a rolling basis, for sure. And, now that we have placed our first order, we're getting in our first inventory. I think once we're past that first distribution, we have more flexibility and more ability to print labels for those test kits and send them home like just the day before. Whereas that first one was like really tight. We needed to know a whole week in advance in order to get the supplies from the state. But now that we've got a little bit of a supply, we can be more flexible. So to answer your questions, families are welcome to continue opting in. And then if they wanted to opt out for some reason, they just need to, send an email either the principal or myself. We'll get that handled.
Thank you.
Janelle, for the opting in, will that be in the Friday newsletter, the link, or is there a place on the website that they can go to?
Yeah, it's already on the website. It went out on School Messenger, and my plan is to put that into the weekly update again this Friday. I think it'll continue to appear there for some time, the reminders with the links. And I'll be honest, the at-home testing program, there's a lot of components to it, and it's a lot of, I think, information for families, to process. Like during, within the at-home testing, we ask families to use a form to report positive results. That's only a result of the at-home testing, and I think, it could be mistaken that you go in there and if you got a positive result at from a doctor's office, that you go in and put it there. So it's just a lot of moving pieces, and we're just working with families to clarify that as we go.
Thank you for that. It's a lot to keep up with.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, for everybody.
Thank you.
Sure.
Let's see. Oh,
Good evening. I will be very brief. I just wanted to pass along some of the information about MCAS prep. As you see from the numbers, about 60% of our students will take at least one MCAS exam in the spring. Currently, that's 632 students. We have already begun doing testing for making sure infrastructure can handle that number of students, making sure we have the correct number of devices available. It's always tight, but we always manage somehow. And again, as the spring goes on, teachers begin to bring their classes down and do some of those practice exams, so it's twofold purpose for us. It helps us find out that, yes, we are in fact ready to go in terms of network infrastructure, wireless and such, but it also gets the students more comfortable with the types of questions or the types of tools that are in the exam itself. So, does anybody have any questions for me about that?
I have a question. Is that voluntary, just whatever teacher decides that they want to bring their class?
Correct. Principals, especially at the elementary school, highly encouraged. And I would say in the middle school here, it tends to be whole class. At the high school, again, it's basically only 10th grade for the most part. They're probably more specific. They're looking at particular writing prompts and whatever. It's less to do about the technology you get for them. Most of them have done it since grade 3 or 4. So the technology isn't the drawback there. They just need practice with the actual content.
Thank you, Paul.
Well,
So the election subcommittee, Adam and Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Lori. I was gonna just do a regular update, but with everything going on, I wrote down some notes and further just read directly from my notes. And I'll give this to Christy afterwards if she wants. So, dear school committee members, administration, and members of the public. In our meeting last week, one member of the public brought up the fact that the current school committee is made up of 5 appointed members. There's also been discussion on social media, and we understand that there might be a letter circulating in the community in regard to the upcoming election. Although we have not yet seen it, we do look forward to any input that the community has on this matter. The election subcommittee would like to offer the following update and review of the regional school committee election before we get into a discussion of several items for your vote tonight. When the district regionalized some years ago, it was decided that of the various options available for regional school committee elections, the committee at that time chose to have district-wide elections during the state's biennial election. These are held in November of those years. It is our understanding that this was one of several options to choose from, and the first such opportunity for a regional committee election after the regionalization would have been in November 2020. The state has a process to follow to hold school committee elections during that biennial election. That committee, the one from 2020 and the committee on which our last serving elected member had a seat, failed to file the necessary paperwork with the state to get on the ballot. Steps were taken to attempt to correct this, including the filing of multiple home rule petitions, which would have required state legislature intervention. A home rule petition is a request from a city or town for a new type of power from the state legislature, and in this case, that power would have been to have a different type of election than originally intended once the mistake was made. The response to COVID and its related issues prevented this from being heard in Boston, and it was abandoned in 2021. There seemed to be some confusion during part of the public comment from our meeting on February 1, 2022. It's unclear why some might claim to be uninformed about the state of the election from members of the Berlin-Boylston Regional School Committee. The election has been discussed numerous times at past school committee meetings. Going back only about a year, the election topic was on the agenda in some form on March 9th, 2021, May 4th, August 31st, September 14th, October 26th. This was the date when the final discussion and vote on the home rule petition took place. Again, it was on the agenda on November 9th. December 14th was when the election FAQ document that the subcommittee wrote up was voted on and the discussion took place and was voted on at that meeting. And most recently, our January 11th meeting, there was an update about the election. The election subcommittee, comprised of Mr. Wilbur and Mr. Talking, has committed to meet each month to continue to review the timeline and make sure we are on track to have this election in November 2022. We're working tirelessly to ensure we keep you and the public informed, and we all have worked hard to ensure that you and the public have in-person, full school committee meetings at which to communicate with us regarding this and other important matters. Since 2020, various committee members have decided that they could no longer serve out their terms on the committee and they stepped down or quit. Each had their reasons, and many explained those reasons to the sitting committee and public at that time. Some did not address the committee or public directly, but did so through email and the press. That was their choice. When an elected member decides to quit, their seat should be filled, otherwise the people who elected them will have no representation at all. To review and for informational purposes, the current committee was appointed in the following order. Lori Hart is one of 2 applicants who applied to fill a vacated seat in February 2020. Michael Topham was the only applicant who applied for the vacated seat in December 2020. Julie Lee was the only applicant who applied to fill the vacated seat in the spring of 2021. Adam Wilbur and Megan Grill were 2 of 6 applicants who applied to fill seats vacated in August 2021. These appointed members have chosen to serve out the remaining time of the term for those who decided to step down or quit. Because the previous committee, of which the last elected member and former chair was a part, failed to hold the election in 2020, it was unknown at the time of these appointments exactly how long this term would be. Nevertheless, these members did step up to serve during unprecedented and tumultuous times. We can now confidently say that this term will end in November 2022. The process to appoint these members was carried out as required and will look exactly like the process to appoint the next member to fill the remainder of the term for the current open Berlin seat. There was a public announcement, the seat was open. There was a public request for applicants, and there was a public interview by the committee of all those who had expressed interest. The committee, including those who had been elected and previously appointed, then voted to select a candidate in each case. In the above cases, it's important to note that all previously elected and appointed members serving at the time voted unanimously on these appointments. Even those who were the sole applicant for the vacated seats needed to be voted in by the committee at that time. The vote could have been to not accept them. It's unfortunate that the last elected member of the committee will not be available to vote on behalf of her constituents at the next appointment, which we expect will be on March 1st, 2022. I feel confident in saying that this committee, consisting of the 5 appointed members, is here tonight to assure the public that there will be a free and fair election, as has been requested, held November 8th, 2022. In that regard, the subcommittee has brought you several items to vote on tonight. We've already voted to approve the FAQ document back in December, which outlines in detail questions and answers surrounding this election, such as the when, how, and why this is being held in November. We're suggesting to post that on a separate, dedicated election page on the district website as soon as possible. We're also bringing to you language for a press release to approve. This release would announce the election and our public question and answer forum we'd like to hold at the April school committee meeting. We'd also suggest posting this on the district page and ask the superintendent if he would include it in a weekly newsletter. This April date corresponds with the expected timing of when nomination papers will become available. We also bring to you for a vote a letter required to be sent to the state informing them of the upcoming open seats for which we would like to hold an election. As a review, all 6 seats will be up for election in November 2022. Per the regional agreement, Berlin will have 2 seats available for a 2-year term and 1 for a 4-year term. Boylston will have 2 seats available for a 4-year term and 1 for a 2-year term. Going forward after the November 22 election and beginning with the November 2024 election, all seats will be for a 4-year term, and half of the seats will be vacated on the staggered basis going forward. This is the way. It was included in the regional agreement approved January 25th, 2019. We've requested time at the April 5th, 2022 school committee meeting to hold an open question and answer session. At this meeting, we will entertain and answer any questions the public might have about the upcoming election logistics. Questions on how to run an individual campaign will not be addressed. Interested candidates should seek information from the state and their own advisors for that. Information regarding this election was also included in the school committee report to the towns, and we would ask that it be highlighted at this year's town meetings. We also commit to keeping the public informed of the election at each regularly scheduled school committee meeting up until the election. Part of our discussion in our last subcommittee meeting centered around community outreach and awareness. The idea of publicizing this on social media did come up. We discussed that social media is a great tool to use to get the word out, but we must be careful. We have learned that committee members must be careful discussing committee business on social media so as to not violate law, and social media can make this difficult. We feel it's appropriate to dedicate a page on the district website to the election if possible. We do not feel we should be posting this information on any non-town government related pages on social media, such as the many private groups formed by community members that are not affiliated directly with the towns or schools, but are simply forums of these topics. If the school committee or its individual members were to post election information on private groups, which may not include all of the public, or if the administrators of those private pages were to close commenting on these posts, that would not support the concept of equity for all that we hold dear. This could violate open meeting law if a quorum of committee members happen to subscribe to those pages and get involved in the posting or comments. We do welcome the administrators of those pages to share the information from our meetings, but for the committee to actively seek out those private pages could lead to a risk of not finding them all and unintentionally excluding some members of the community who are on other pages. An example of this would be a recent committee agenda being shared on certain Berlin neighbors' Facebook pages by a former committee member, but not on other Berlin resident-related pages. This including of one group and excluding of another is not how we should operate. It is not equity. We should entertain a policy update regarding this as soon as possible. For those who have written and spoken recently about the failure of past committees and elected members to hold an election, please know the public can rest assured that this committee is dedicated to bringing you a free and fair election in November 2022. Thank you.
Adam, do you have anything to add?
I just thank Mike for providing what I believe is a very accurate representation of what's occurred over the last 2 or 3 years within this topic of the election. I'll also comment that I personally, as I think Lori, Mike, and Jeff can attest to, prior to joining the committee or being appointed to the committee, did question on several occasions why an election hadn't happened when it should have happened. I appreciate the attention that the three of you did give to those questions when I was a private citizen, since I'm a private citizen, but at the time. And I think that everything Mike just said is factually accurate and well stated.
Does anyone have any questions for Adam? Okay, thank you. Are there any updates from Jesse regarding the mask mandate? Pretty much the same. Okay. We're going to have an open discussion on a letter to Jesse regarding the mask mandate. Does anyone want to?
So I'm happy to start the way I did share a version of a potential letter that I think we should consider when looking at the letter to be sent to Jesse. I'll just comment that the version you're able to see here in the drive that I wrote and drafted is primarily focusing on the decision-making authority and not the question of whether or not we should continue to require masks in schools. Very much focused on the issue of which body is closest to this issue and able to be best listening to concerned citizens on this topic, as well as focusing on the equity question around the vaccination threshold and some issues I personally feel strongly about in that case. And then finally noting that there had been some activity in the last 24 hours where some neighboring governors have moved to return this decision-making authority to local school committees and urging the Department of Education to do the same in Massachusetts. So I offer that for discussion, and you'll see the version I provided that it includes a number of line numbers should there be any suggested edit before we move towards moving.
Are there any members that would like to comment on this?
So essentially we have 2 letters to Desi that are proposed by 2 members, or are we doing away with the original one and this, or is that what we're deciding now?
So nonetheless, maybe Mr. John offered to draft a letter as well.
Yes.
I certainly want to get his thoughts on the options in front of us and which way we should proceed.
I think you do words in second.
Okay. Adam, I like your letter. No offense, I just like that it's more focused on give us the facts. And it's not, I don't think it's giving up too much of the position of our community. It's more requesting that we have the science and the facts so that we can make a decision And it's more requesting that, they follow suit of other governments that have already released that decision down to localities. Or at least have set a date for that. I mean, obviously, it's not gonna happen tomorrow, but.
I think those are all good points. I think everything that's happened in the last few days over the weekend, I wrote this last week, so.
Yep,
A lot of
agreed.
that stuff happened after I wrote the letter. I think Adam's much more aggressive, and I think it's perfectly acceptable.
Well, Mike, I thought you wrote a really good letter. I really appreciated the effort that you put into it. I thought it was wonderful, and
I mean, the entire landscape changed over the weekend.
It did, it changed so much.
Yeah.
And we've received emails from the community that have said, if you're writing a letter out to DESE and you're stating that, we want masks, we don't want masks, doesn't necessarily represent the whole town. So the way that we're asking questions about asking for local control, and pointing out, that local, nearby states are sending or leaving it up to local control or having specific dates. I like that openness. So we're not necessarily looking for one thing or the other. We're masking or not masking. We're looking for the ability to have a discussion about it, on the floor, taking in so many different opinions and research and all the other pieces that go into it. So.
A couple of things I'll just highlight for those who can't see the letter, but will be able to see whatever version we decide to pass. And you could also request to see this in the future. I made three, key points within the letter I drafted. The first one is that our committee has been discussing the mask mandate and listening to citizens who are concerned about it, regardless of what side of the issue they may be on. We've done that at 3 meetings in the last month, on the 11th, the 25th, and the 1st of February. During these meetings, we heard public comments from parents, medical professionals, scientists, and teachers. Furthermore, we had our listening session, as the public commenter noted earlier, we had almost 300 people who watched that listening session that we did last week. That's almost double the number of people who watched a similar session back in August, and this topic was on the table. The conclusion of that first section of the letter is that our committee understands our community better than DESE because we are the ones who are listening to them. The second point in my letter talks about the inequities of requiring all communities to reach a somewhat arbitrary 80% vaccination rate, because all the communities in this state are not equal in terms of racial makeup, in terms of economics, or in terms of the willingness of the people in those towns to have their children vaccinated. I specifically note, based on data that I sourced yesterday, that in Boylston, 54% of our 5 to 11-year-olds are fully vaccinated, whereas 90% are vaccinated in Foxborough. In Worcester, 21% of those children are vaccinated, whereas 70% are vaccinated in Wellesley. And only 23% of elementary-age children are fully vaccinated in Holyoke, whereas 95% of those same children are fully vaccinated in Hopkinton. My point in this section is to note that given the correlation between vaccination rate and race, it is inequitable to require that every community be measured to the same 80% vaccination threshold measuring stick. If the vaccination threshold continues, we will soon see that the predominantly white schools and wealthy communities will be mask-free, while the schools with more racially diverse student populations will remain masked. Final point of my letter talks about some of the recent activity that we've seen, both from the Secretary of Education and the Secretary of Health and Human Services, as they've commented on the twindemic that exists within higher education, specifically noting the profound impact that virus mitigation has had on our citizens' mental health. They urged higher ed leaders to reconsider protocols to help promote a return to healthy social interactions. They stated in their letter on January 28th that these higher ed institutions should accelerate their efforts to transition college students back to near normal conditions. Our committee urges you as DESE to accelerate efforts to transition the K-12 students back to near normal conditions as well. And then finally, yesterday, the governors of New Jersey, Connecticut, and Delaware announced they will return this decision-making authority to local school committees and district administrators. These 3 states are joining the now 41 other states that do not mandate masks at the state level. We agree with these recent sentiments from the secretaries, as well as the decisions of governors in these neighboring states. It is time to do the same in Massachusetts by allowing local school districts to begin our efforts to transition back to near normal conditions for our K-12 students as well.
I think the letter is outstanding.
Thank you.
I think, yeah. I thought yours was also equally outstanding. But I just Yeah, exactly, right, the landscape change. But this part about, you know, when you see those percentages, Boylston, Boxborough, Worcester, Wellesley, Holyoke, Hopkinton, and then you arrive at the statement, we will soon see that predominantly white schools and wealthy communities will be mask free, while the schools with more racially diverse student populations will remain masked. Is really powerful. And you're right on point. And then the mental health piece, it's really well done, really thoughtful, really thoughtful.
Anyone else have anything to add? Thank you to both of you for taking the time to write the letters. It does take, I mean, I don't think anybody knows what it's like behind the scenes in the school committee when you're given a task and you have to organize and get it all done. It's a lot of work, so I really appreciate that. So I guess we will move on to our business items. Could I have a motion to approve the 2022-23 athletic fees?
So, there's no increase, right?
No increase.
Okay, sure.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And aye as well. Opposed? The motion passes, and we will approve the 2022-23 athletic fees to remain the same. Could I have a motion to accept a donation from the Project Red School Meal Support Grant in the amount of $330.25? Mike, can I have a second?
Yes, I can.
Julia, read your first. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I am an aye as well. Opposed? Okay, the motion to accept the donation passes. Could I have a motion to approve the letters we sent to DESE regarding the mask mandate?
So I moved the letter as I provided.
Yes.
You all, using the folder here, you know, with my letter had some line numbers in it, which we will remove prior to sending to DESE. We really included those should there have been any specific discussion about changing to the letter this evening. So I moved the letter as I presented, minus the line numbers, and we'll make that motion.
Seconded. Discussion?
Just one point more that
Yes.
came up is I'm in the letter copying this to several other organizations and individuals within the state. So I asked that we copy this letter to Governor Baker, to Senator Chairman, Representative McClellan, as well as the board of Detectives, both Berkeley and Willis.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Opposed? The motion passes. We will be sending Adam's version of the letter to DESE regarding mask mandate, as well as to other people in the state. Could I have a motion to approve a press release regarding the election?
So moved.
Megan, second? Mike, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Opposed? Okay, the motion passes to, approve the press release, I'm so sorry. My glasses are on. I normally wear contacts. Thank you. I'd like to, I'd entertain a motion for the school committee approval of a letter to the Secretary of State to inform him of our November 2022 election.
Moved. Second.
Mike, Adam, discussion?
Just one point on this, you'll see in the letter that we indicated that one seat is currently vacant. We did have some questions amongst ourselves at the election subcommittee, we decided that we want to get the letter in now.
Yeah.
We need another letter upon the appointment of the individual into that seat, hopefully March 1st, meeting, so we get someone is appointed at that point.
I appreciate that. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Opposed? The motion passes to send the letter, approve the letter to the Secretary of State to inform of our November election. And we had a Tohoto student handbook first read. So we're not quite sure if the school committee approves that or if Jeff approves that.
I'm sure.
You sure?
Yeah.
Jeff is the one that approves it.
You approve a program of studies.
Okay. So disregard. All right,
So we're not doing anything with the handbook.
all right. We can, any comments that you have, questions, concerns, should we send them to
I don't know.
Diane? No, I'm just thinking if
Yeah,
anybody
if anyone else, yeah.
Send it to the principals.
Send it to the principals. Excellent. Okay, our upcoming school committee meetings will be on February 15th. That's next Tuesday. Bob will be doing his budget presentation. I encourage the community to watch that meeting. I know it's not exciting, but it's extremely important. It involves your tax
Sounds
bills.
exciting. So-
Bob.
I'm excited. I want to see those spreadsheets.
And then we have one on March 1st and one on March 8th. And just a reminder that we do have an open seat in Berlin. If a Berlin resident would like to, sign up for that, for the seat, possibly, I apologize, I'm losing my brain right now. If we have any member or anybody in the community that would like to be appointed to the committee, we ask that you submit a resume. You can email it to me or to Christy. And we will be discussing on March 1st. Any people from the community that would like to run for that seat, and I would really encourage people. There's a lot of, the school committee is a very interesting thing to be a part of, and it's very complicated. There's a lot more to it than any of us, I think, knew until you were really here. But it is a wonderful thing to be a part of, and I value the members that are here. I'm grateful to work with you, and I'm grateful for your enthusiasm. And I would encourage anybody that would like to work with us to step up to the plate. It's a really important job. So thank you for that.
Can I ask one quick question about that? Is it going to be the same that we had before where you submit a resume and then we'll each ask a question?
Yes.
All right, just so people know.
That's absolutely,
Yeah.
that's a good question.
So that you plan to come and you'll speak a little bit and,
And I'll let anybody that applies know the protocol as well. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn? Second. Julie, thank you. Roll call. Adam? Julie?
Yes.
Megan?
yes.
Mike?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. This concludes our meeting. Thank you very much.